The Letter, the Witch, and the Ring by John Bellairs, Chapter 11. Rosrita lay in the darkness. She felt a slight pressure on her eyes and knew there was something covering them, but she didn't know what it was. She would have reached up to uncover her eyes, but she couldn't. Her hands were crossed on her breast. And though she could feel them, she couldn't move them. She couldn't move any part of her body, nor could she speak. But she could hear and she could feel. As she lay there, a fly, it felt like a fly, landed on her forehead and walked the length of her nose before buzzing away. Where was she? Probably in the bedroom above Gert Bigger's store. It felt as if she were lying on a bed anyway. And there was a blanket, or something like a blanket, drawn up over her body. It felt heavy, and the room was hot and still. Tiny rivulets of sweat ran down Rosrita's body. Why couldn't she move? Was she paralyzed or what? There came back to her now, like a bad dream, the terror that she had felt when she saw Gert Bigger standing on the bed, leering at her. She must have fainted then, because she could not remember anything after that. Rosrita heard a lock click. The door creaked open. Heavy footfalls crossed the room and stopped next to her head. A chair creaked.
Well. How are you, Miss Nosy? Not speaking to me? That's not nice. You know, I'm the one who ought to be insulted. The way you broke in here and rummaged around. Were you trying to find out if I was a witch? Well, you can relax. I am.
Gert Bigger laughed, and it was not the kind of laugh that you would expect to come out of a big husky woman like her. It was a high-pitched, tinny giggle. Rosrita thought it sounded like the laughter of a crazy person.
Yes, sirree, Gert Bigger went on. It all started when that old fool of a Gunderson dropped in here one night. He was half crocked and he started talking about this magic ring he had found on his farm. Well, at first I thought he was just fooling, but I got to thinking later, what if it's the truth? You see, I've always wanted to be able to work magic. I've studied up on it a lot. Well, after old Ole kicked off, I broke into his place and hunted around till I found that darned thing. It's on my finger right now. Did you read in that book what that fellow Burchard said about it? It's all true, you know, every word. Here, let me read it to you.
Rosrita heard the sound of fingers rifling through the pages of a book.
Here it is, where I stuck the marker. You must have seen it when you were poking around, though sometimes you nosy types don't see what's right under your nose.
She giggled again.
Ready? Here it is. No account of Jewish antiquities would be complete without mention of the legendary ring of King Solomon. According to the great historian Flavius Josephus, King Solomon possessed a magic ring that enabled him to do many wonderful things. The ring gave him the power of teleportation. That is, the ability to be whisked from place to place unseen. It conferred upon him the powers of sorcery and divination, and enabled him to humiliate his enemies by changing them into lowly beasts. In this manner, it is said, King Solomon brought low the king of the Hittites when he turned him into an ox. The ring also enabled Solomon to change his own shape at will. His most favored form is said to be that of a small black dog, in which shape he prowled about, spying on his enemies and finding out many secrets. But the greatest power of the ring was one which Solomon, wisest of men, never chose to use. The ring could, if the wearer desired it, give long life and great beauty. To obtain this gift, however, the wearer was obliged to call upon the demon Asmodai. It may be for this reason that Solomon refused to exercise the power of this ring, for we are told he who sups with the devil. The book slammed shut. That's enough of you, Reverend, muttered Gert Bigger. Well, there you are, Miss Nosy. Isn't that interesting? But I'll tell you what is most interesting of all. You came here just at the right time. You really did. I was going to do something to you when I caught you poking around in my back room. But later I says to myself, she'll be back. And you know, and you did come back. You did.
Gert Bigger let out a peal of shrill laughter.
I left the padlock off my cellar door and you went right in, like the little fool that you are. Well, you're going to find out what it's like to monkey around with witches. Florence found out, and I'm not through with her yet. Not by a long shot. She paused and made an unpleasant spitting sound. Oh, didn't I know? Didn't I know what she was up to when she showed up here, pretending she was out of gas? I knew about her and all that magic monkey do of hers, that college degree and all. And I says to myself, she's after the ring. I was real worried then because I didn't know how to handle the ring proper, excepting for the black dog trick. Well, after you folks went up north, I learned. I sent the photographed up there, and that was me you saw in Florence's room. I showed up in the back seat of your car for a couple of seconds too. Scared the dickens out of you, didn't I? She laughed shrilly. Then, after another pause, she continued in a grimmer tone. Well, fun's fun. But I'm through playing around. I've got Florence, and I'm going to fix her good, and she'll never be able to get my ring from me, not ever. Of course, she added, I've got a special grudge against her for making my life miserable. If me and Morty had got married, my life would have been better. The old fool that I was married to used to beat me up. You don't know what it was like. You don't know at all. Gert Bigger's voice cracked. Was she crying? Rosarita couldn't tell. Gert Bigger rambled on in her hard, angry voice. She explained to Rosarita that she had put her under a death spell. When dawn came, she would die. They would find her body surrounded by the paraphernalia of Gert Bigger's magic. But Gert Bigger would be gone. In fact, there would be no Gert Bigger because she would be a beautiful young woman. She had it all figured out. She would go away to another place and change her name. She had drawn all her money out of the bank. It was in the safe downstairs with a new name and a new life. She could start making up for all the rotten things that had happened to her. And before she left, she would settle accounts with Florence Zimmerman for good and for all. After she had finished talking, Gert Bigger left the room and locked the door. Rosarita stared hopelessly into the darkness that lay around her. She thought about Aggie. Aggie was her only hope. Rosarita had no idea how much time had gone by since she left Aggie standing outside the cellar door. She hoped that Gert Bigger hadn't captured Aggie too. Rosarita prayed, though her mouth stayed shut and no sound came out. Please, God, help Aggie find me. Make her get help before it's too late. Please, God, please. A long time passed. At least it seemed like a long time, though Rosarita had no way of telling how long it was. Her wristwatch was still on her wrist, ticking, but it did her no good. How would she know when it was dawn? She would know when she was dead. Tick, 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 tick. Rosarita could feel her body growing numb. She could feel her hands on her breast. She couldn't feel her hands on her breast anymore. She had a horrible vision of herself as a severed head lying on a pillow. It was such an awful thought that she tried to get rid of it, but it kept coming back. Please, God, send Aggie, send somebody. Tick, 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 tick. Bring! A doorbell was ringing. It rang several times, and then Rosarita heard the muffled tinkling of the little bell above the door of the store. She heard nothing after that. If people were talking, she couldn't hear them. Silence. More time passed. Then Rosarita heard the lock on the bedroom door click, footsteps, and the creak of a chair as somebody heavily sat down. My Lord, it takes all kinds to make a world, said Gert Bigger. Who do you suppose I've just been talking to? Guess. Give up? Mrs. Sipes, who lives down the road. Her and her daughter. Aggie, I think is her name. They were all wrought up because Aggie said I'd kidnapped you. Imagine that, Gert Biggers giggled. They had even brought a cop along with them to search the place. Well, I know my rights. He didn't have no search warrant, and I told him so. I says to him, I know my rights, and you can't come in. And no, I don't know nothing about no little girl. So there! Imagine the nerve of them coming here like that. Gert Bigger laughed again. The chair creaked as she rocked back and forth, laughing. The tiny flame of hope in Rosarita's mind flickered out. She was going to die, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Gert Bigger left the room, and there was another long, dark silence. Rosarita kept hearing little sounds, but she couldn't figure out what they were. Finally, the door creaked open, and she heard Gert Bigger walking around the room. She was humming to herself, and there was a sound of drawers opening and shutting.
She was packing up, getting ready to leave. After what seemed like a long time, Rosarita heard the latches of a suitcase snap shut. Gert Bigger walked over to her chair by the head of the bed and sat down again. "How are you doing? Feel anything yet? This spell comes over you gradual like, or so I'm told. But it won't be over with till dawn, and that's still a ways off yet. Okay, now. I'm all ready to go. I haven't taken care of Florence yet, but I think I'll do that on the way out. I want her to see what I'm like after I've been changed. And you know what? Seeing as how you've been so nice and quiet, I'm going to let you watch me do my little quick change act. Well, of course, I'm kidding in a way because I can't really let you see me. I'd have to take those things off your eyes, and that would break the spell. So we can't have that, can we? No, siree, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll sit right here in this chair and summon up old Asmodai, and you can hear his voice. How'll that be? Let me see now. What is it that I do? Oh, yes. Gert Biggers clapped her hands 3 times and said in a loud, commanding voice. Send Asmodai to me, now! At first, nothing happened. Then slowly, Rosarita began to feel the presence of something evil. Feeling returned to her body. Her flesh was covered with goosebumps, and she felt cold. The air grew thick and was hard to breathe. Out of the darkness, a harsh, whispery voice spoke. Who calls upon Asmodai? I do. I'm wearing the ring of King Solomon, and I want to be changed. I want to be young and beautiful, and I want to live for 1,000 years, Gert added quickly. But I don't want to get old. I want to stay young all the time. So be it, said the whispery voice. As soon as the whispery voice had finished speaking, Rosarita heard a small sound. It was a sound like somebody dropping a quarter on the floor. Then there was a sound like a strong wind roaring through the room. The room trembled, as if the ground underneath the building was quaking. Rosarita heard all sorts of rattling, clattering noises. The bed shook, and whatever had been on her eyes slid off. She sat up and shook her head groggily. Rosarita looked around. Where were her glasses? What had Gert Bigger done with them? She groped around on the nightstand and found them. She put them on and glanced around. Gert Bigger was gone. She had not heard her go out, and the key was sticking out of the inside of the door. On the bed next to her, Rosarita saw 2 silver dollars. They must have been the things over her eyes, and she found that she was lying under a heavy black woolen blanket. It had a white border and a big white cross on it. Rosarita knew what it was. She had been to a funeral at the Catholic Church in New Zebedee, and she had seen a casket covered with a blanket just like this one. With a violent shudder, she thrust the thing away from her and sat up. Rosarita felt sick. She felt like somebody who had been in bed with the flu for 2 weeks. When she tried to stand up, she sat down again suddenly. Sweat was pouring down her face. As she gazed woozily around the room, it occurred to her to wonder what had happened to Mrs. Bigger. Probably she had had her wish granted, and she was out in Hollywood living it up with Lana Turner and Esther Williams and all that crowd. Rosarita didn't know, and she didn't care. She felt dizzy, and she couldn't stop shuddering. Her head was as light as a wicker basket. Finally, with an effort, she forced herself to stand up. Now she remembered something that had puzzled her. That sound, like a coin hitting the floor. What was it? Rosarita got down on her hands and knees and looked under the bed. And at that moment, she heard from downstairs a terrific pounding and banging. The doorbell rang about 8 times, and a muffled voice yelled, "Open up! Open up in the name of the law!" They were back. Aggie and her mom and the cops. Rosarita glanced toward the door. What if Mrs. Bigger had left the ring behind? Wouldn't it be great to be able to run downstairs to meet Aggie with the ring of King Solomon in her fist? Rosarita bent over and scrabbled in the dust under the bed. There it was. She reached out and hooked the ring with her finger. Now she drew the ring to her and closed her fist around it. And with that, something happened. A shudder ran through Rosarita's body, and she felt, well, strange. She felt proud and bitter and angry at all the people who had come to drag her back to her old life. And we will pause there.